Welcome back to the Better by Nature podcast, where we are talking with folks who have inspiring stories of overcoming adversity by relying on natural remedies. Today I'm joined by Army veteran, entrepreneur, and cannabis advocate for veterans, Robert Head. After his career in the military, Robert has found a calling advocating for cannabis access for fellow veterans. Before we jump in, this episode is brought to you by Life Leaf Remedies. At Life Leaf Remedies, we're making natural remedies that help you feel better today. Replace those unnatural household remedies that we've leaned on for too long with superior natural remedies. Check us out at lifeleafremedies.com today. Now, I hope you'll enjoy this episode of the Better by Nature podcast and feel better today, y'all.
And so one of the things I like is that everybody on my board and everybody that I talk to, my subject matter experts, they're top of the class of what they do. And so when we have conversations, the conversations can get really deep. They can get really specific. You know, they can answer a lot of questions. So I tend to come from it from the perspective of a soldier and a grunt. Because that's what I was, right? I was just a soldier. I was a grunt. I got to an E4. And then I was a specialist when I got out, right? E4 Mafia. Tell you what, I was a godfather. I knew how to do it when I was in the Army, man. I tell you what, I could get away with anything. And I had people getting moved from one unit to another unit for family sakes and things. Yeah, I had this guy in my unit. It was he just got there, and then his brother was coming like 6 months later. But his brother was going to First Cap, and we were at Fort Hood, and I think it's called something else now. But I was in 4th ID, and he was going to go to First Cap. First Cap and 4th ID just cycled in and out of Iraq.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Well, that's hard for a mother to go through.
Yeah.
And so I was like, can't. So I finagled a way to get that kid all the way over to the same brigade that we were in.
Yeah.
So he would deploy with his brother and come back with his brother.
Wow.
And so I would do sneaky shit like that. But I did it because it was just the right thing to do. And, you know, I've always been in a field of service.
Yeah.
Right. I tried to be maybe I thought I was a businessman. Maybe I thought I was going to be a soldier for the rest of my life. You know, you always try to figure out who you're going to be as you grow. And then you realize that you don't really fit into a certain box. And so you start finding out what your strengths are and using it for your passion. That may or may not lead to how you pay your bills.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But it's something you should invest time into doing.
Well, and if you can make those two meet, now you're really winning.
Yeah. Right. That's the success in life, and that does start to happen as you get older in life. So if you're in your 30s out there and you feel like it's not coming together, you just be patient, my friend.
You got to keep grinding.
You got to keep grinding.
Yeah.
I tell you, Coach Prime, I like Coach Prime. I know they got the shit kicked.
Oh no, I could totally go with you on Coach Prime.
But I love that guy because look what he did at Jackson State.
Absolutely.
I mean, those kids left there knowing that no matter what problems they have in their future, they're going to be able to handle it because they were given that confidence and security by Prime.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest value I think that man has.
Oh yeah.
And they're obviously you can't put a dollar sign on that. And they're not paying him for that, but they're paying him for wins. But I can tell you,
which will come because of that.
Right. Which will come because of that. He's going to put a really good program together. So I'm excited. But my point being is that he always says, you know, if you're making plays and no one's noticed it, keep making the plays.
Right.
Keep doing the things you got to do, and it'll start coming together. And that's kind of what the cannabis industry has been doing for the past 80 years.
It's a long road, man.
It's a long road. It's coming together.
Road. Well, hey, we jumped in there. Give the listeners a little bit of background on yourself, man. Who are you, and where'd you come from, and how did you get here?
Yeah. So my name is Robert Head. I am the chair for a 501c3 called Hemp for Victory. I started this 501c3. It was approached by a gentleman by the name of Todd Scatini, who's a West Point graduate. And he approached me about 2.5 years ago. And one of the things he said, hey, you know, I think we ought to have like a after party during the West Point and Air Force Academy game. It'll be held in Arlington Stadium. And it was right there at Texas Live. I said, yeah, that'd be a great idea. So we kind of threw this mixer together, and we had, I think, Weed Maps and a few other companies help. And we had like 400 people show up.
Wow.
Yeah. And not 400 like NCOs. And saying, no, these were top brass guys. We had generals, colonels, we had majors, guys who were retired West Pointers, Annapolis guys, retired Air Force graduates, general people just from the highest levels that were working even after they retired. They went to work for the State Department, the DOD, things like that. And they came back because they wanted to see Todd, or they wanted to see some of their other friends.
Right.
And they loved the idea of having conversations about this because they felt like it was time, it was needed. Well, Todd came to me later on and said, you know what, we really ought to make a group called Hemp for Victory. and we just host discussions about it. And I'm like, Todd, it's a crazy idea. And I said, but it might work. The reason why I thought it was kind of unique is that most 501c3s are doing something directly related to the veteran, right? And I said, what you're asking us to do is create a 501c3 that talks.
Sure.
And he's like, yeah, but it's going to be prior military leadership.
Okay.
Like colonels and generals and people who own businesses that had good careers, highly decorated individuals. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how cannabis is benefiting the veterans community.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we became.
Man.
And so now we have a subject matter expert list, like 30 people long, and there's groups in there like Texas A&M's in there. And what they do is they are specialized in something specific relating to cannabis.
Okay.
It may be healthcare reform. It may be the legal aspect of it from a business perspective. It may be a legal aspect from it from a individual liberties aspect. They may be somebody who is a doctor in neuroscience, family physicians. And what happens is that when we find that there are a lot of organizations out there that have questions and want to know, but what they don't want is to be yelled at.
Yeah.
They don't. And I get that, right?
I get it.
I don't be yelled at either.
Yeah.
Spent 5.5 years in the Army. I got yelled at enough. Maybe that's why I was only in E4. I don't know. But I can tell you that when you look at the cannabis industry, the cannabis industry is a bubble.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things that we talk about are kind of just echo within this bubble. And a good example of that is the Texas Cannabis Roundup. It's a wonderful thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because that thing it's an outstanding. Dalton does an amazing job putting that together.
Shout out to Dalton.
Big shout out.
Dalton O'Neill.
Dalton O'Neill. I'll tell you what. You guys, if you're not in the cannabis industry, you don't know. You need to know Dalton. Dalton is a person who can get you to know people.
Absolutely.
And he's really brilliant. And my wife just absolutely adores him.
Well, he's busting his butt, and I believe, what does he say? We try hard, right?
Yeah, we try hard.
So, is it green light events?
Yeah, it's green light events. I think so. So this is a great example because this is an event where we get out and we try to mix and we mingle. We find out more about the community and more about the hemp industry. And when we have these discussions, it all revolves within this hemp industry, this group, right? But it never really gets outside of that. Now,
exactly.
that is important for the Roundup, because the Roundup we're getting to know each other and expanding our business. But when it comes to activism, right, getting people outside of our industry and outside of our bubble to know about it so that our bubble can expand, like into banking or things of that nature, then that's the job that where we come in. Because what I realized a couple years ago, I was at this veteran. Where was it? Tyler, Texas, or something like that.
Okay.
No, it was down there. I think it was down in Fort Hood. But anyways, so I'm at this event, and this gentleman comes out here, and he's a state representative, and talking about he wants to see cannabis, available for veterans, and I'm like, that's great, but what about home grow? And he's like, oh, no, I can't support home grow because you can grow it with as much THC as you want. And, of course, people were like, oh, no, they were yelling at him, screaming at him. And I said to myself, I was like, now look at what scenario this is. This is not an idiot.
Yeah.
This guy is an educated man.
Yeah.
He's an intelligent person. Just because he doesn't know about cannabis doesn't make him an idiot.
Right.
There's no reason to yell about it. What we're seeing here is the consequences of people who have no idea the details of cannabis. And apparently whoever has been telling them doesn't have very good information or may not know how to relay that information to people like that. And
in a more malicious sense, might have just been communicating wrong information.
And it could have been communicating wrong information.
Yeah.
So it started to become aware to me that I felt like the education that the upper echelon leadership, the people that make the decision makers in law, the decision makers in politics, the decision makers in any industry. Let's talk about healthcare industry, the hospitals, or anything like that. All of these want to be educated and talked to by their peers, not by screaming kids.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that to be rude.
No,
but that's the way that they're looking at it. And here's the thing too. First off, screaming kids, keep doing what you're doing because you're beautiful. It is extreme. This is where it becomes
effective.
This is where it becomes more of a war plan.
Yeah.
Right? I need them to continue doing what they're doing, being the activists they are with the passion they have, while I and my group get to the upper echelon and do our job up there. It looks very different, right? We just don't have pot leaves. We come in, we have, support from Harvard, or we have support from these other massive universities that believe in the education. We can get into the door with these people and into the door with the DOD and certain military bases more so than other people.
Right.
Because I want them to understand why you guys are shouting.
Right.
And we do it in a manner of education, getting them to understand what the plant does, why it interacts with the body, where the cannabinoid system is, why is it that it helps out with pain over everything else. Here's the studies that show it. Here's our background. These are people who support us. And then all of a sudden, it's about, I learned a lot. I didn't know that. No problem. We'll come back again and have any other questions. And it has to just be an evolution.
Right.
Right. And it's a marathon.
It absolutely, well, and it has been. It's already been a decades-long marathon, right?
Yeah.
And that was one of the big reasons I was so interested in getting you on the podcast, because you have so much to talk about from that perspective. And that's one thing that as a brand, LifeLeaf, we've been trying to accomplish as well. And we talked about it before. I was saying, cannabis as an industry, we've been really good at talking to each other, and we speak terpenes, we speak extraction processes, we got all sorts of different breeds of plant we can talk about, and all the different cannabinoids that, what's going on with those things. And all of that, I shouldn't say all of it, but like 99.9% of that goes over an uneducated consumer's head. Mm-hmm. And we still have such a massive population of people out there that could benefit from cannabis, but like you're saying, they've been getting wrong information. They've been, getting skewed information. Their perspective is narrow. Whatever it may be, they have some sort of bias against cannabis at this point and its potential for benefits, right? I think what I've noticed is anybody who's sort of skeptical of cannabis after they've heard the medical benefits probably see the medical benefits as some sort of Trojan horse for the recreational folks. And it's like, I hear you, I get it, but it's just not. I think that the I won't even say medical, but just therapeutic and beyond benefits of cannabis, I can't even measure how far that outweighs the recreational benefit.
Right. Yeah, I agree. There's 2 points on that that I think are really important. First off, when we talk about recreational or adult use, the argument is skewed. And I think the argument should be this. Should be access to the plant, not whether you can go out of your house and buy it at a local store. And there's a difference.
There is a difference. You mentioned it a little bit there earlier.
Yeah, so there's a difference. So an access to the plant would mean that I can grow it in my home and I can extract it there at the house for my own medicine, whether I make RSO, Rick Simpson oil, or I decide to just cure it there, and I can use it for whatever reason I want to make, food, smoke, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then if I have some friends and I have a deck, hey guys, I got to repaint this deck, and I'll give each one of you half a pound.
Heck yeah, man.
Would you come over and help me out? And so we'll drink some beers, and afterwards we'll watch the game. Sounds good? All right, we'll do that. That is a barter system in which humanity was built on.
Absolutely. Okay.
So
that's true capitalism right there.
That's true capitalism. So from my perspective, that should be what the adult market is. But the problem is that there's always cost. They're saying, well, we don't want you to get rich off of it. And I think that's the thing. Well, there's two sides of the story, right? You have the right to grow and sell whatever you want if there's a market for it, right? To a certain extent, right? As long as you're not hurting somebody else, right? And I think that's fine. But if you ask for access to the plant and make that your priority, the latter will come.
Exactly.
The friction right now is that there's like, how do you set up company? I mean, look at what's going on in California. We're in Texas right now, and California has a great program compared to Texas.
Oh, no doubt.
But they've screwed it up with taxes and making money priority instead of making it really to everybody. You can have it, you can grow it, but if you want to buy and sell it, there's going to be stricter regulations around.
Sure.
It. And I get that.
Yeah.
Even Maine's got a really good idea. Maine has what is it? It's called a caregiver. You grow up to like 15 to 30 plants.
Wow.
And then it's for $1,500, I think. But anybody who has a medical card can come buy it from you for whatever they cost you want to sell it at. Yeah.
That's a great way to decentralize the market.
Right. What it did, and I don't know if it really decentralized the market up there because remember we don't have interstate commerce with it. And
I guess within the state. I mean, compared to what Texas came out with, while we're kind of comparing all the states, when Texas came out, what was it, 2016, I guess, with the teacup, the compassionate use program, they had three licenses across the state to grow.
They had 5. They only gave 3 out. They've been saying forever they're going to give out more, but
here we are. but that's the point, is where versus Maine, where if you can sign up for something like that, you can only grow 15 to 30 plants. You're limited on the market you can serve, but that opens it up for almost anybody. Let's be honest, growing this plant,
you're not going to get rich on it.
You're not going to get rich on it, but it can be done relatively easily. Now, the best plants, the award-winning plants, you need your doctorate in cannabis.
Yeah, a lot of the ones that do it, they get together and they'll open up caretaker stores, and so they kind of bond together, and they'll have these what do you call them? I got to look up my phone real quick, but they have every week or every 2 weeks, they have this big farmer's market of marijuana.
Oh, wow.
And it's not called that, though, but they call it something else. And they're called the Mid-Sesh Maine. Mid-Sesh Maine. I think that's it.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah. They're a great group of guys. Great group of guys. And so you walk into this like warehouse, and everybody's got tables up, and that's their stuff. So like if you know somebody that's been growing that you've been hearing about, and they got their strain, then they can go buy, and they'll have these big jars. You sniff, you just buy whatever you want. I mean, it's like going to a farmer's market for vegetables. It's just all weed. Yeah. And anything that you want to get, and it's good too. Like that's the thing too. There's none of it's not laced with anything, because the second you hear about that stuff is on black market. It's not there. Right. That's the stuff you get that they sell to places like in Texas,
of course,
where there's no regulated market. You send that shit down to Texas.
Wild
West.
West.
You're not going to get it up there. So you get really good home crafted weed, just like you would get like good tomatoes or something like that.
Exactly.
And I like that. Now I'm an old school kind of stoner, right? I like my pipe. I like being left alone. And do my smoke. I'm also very respectful of others too. I don't have a desire to walk up and down smoking if other people don't like it. I don't want to be offensive to anybody else either. No. So there's a balance, and I think we're kind of figuring that out. I think that balance is coming into play.
I think so.
But I would say that if you're active in politics, then you need to really reassess the combination of where you're at morally and where your party is on cannabis, because the feedback that I get from people who just do not want it legalized are people who hold true to old tales.
Of course, yeah.
And like perfect example is Pete Sessions. Was it Pete or
I think it was Pete Sessions.
was it Pete Sessions in Dallas or was it the other Sessions? There's Pete and there's another one.
No, the other one was one of Trump's guys.
Yeah, he was the AG or something.
I can't remember what
he wasn't a
Sessions
fan
that
of.
was. Yeah, neither one of them are fans.
Neither one of them was fans. So the Pete, I think the Pete was in Texas. So Pete was up here, and there was this huge movement to get him out.
Yeah,
right. Gets out. Colin Aldred was the one that stepped in, and then Pete hightails it down to like Central Texas. Lives somewhere for like a year and then runs and gets in the office next year. Mm-hmm. Slime ball, dude. Mm-hmm. Total slime ball, right? Nothing illegal about it, but it doesn't mean you can be a dick and not break a law.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
They just had a whole court case down in Austin about it. Did you hear about it?
I didn't hear about that case.
Yeah,
no.
You can be apparently. Not illegal to be a dick.
It's not illegal to be a dick. It's not. It's frowned upon. You know,
it's frowned upon.
You won't make a lot of friends.
Yeah. Yeah, unless you're in Austin.
No, but you know what? I want to expand on that though. And here, if we do have politicians listening, fantastic. Thank you for listening. But the first part, analyze your own principles and where you stand on that. And then I would say stand firm. Because it seems like both parties are sort of up for grabs as far as it comes to cannabis. You know, there's been movement on both sides for pro and against, I think you could say. And I want to encourage more politicians to be fearlessly pro cannabis. There's just too many benefits from the plant to ignore it. And in a time right now where society's pretty turbulent, to say the least, there's a lot of folks that could be satisfied by just freeing the plant, so to speak, right?
Yeah. And 100%.
It's good for revenue, good for the economy, right? It's good for a lot of natural health folks. It's also great for the environment, and that's one thing that I think is very downplayed, and I don't understand why, because usually the environment folks are pretty enthusiastic about something that is pro-environment, but it's, I think 4 times better than trees, hemp is at pulling CO2 out of the atmosphere.
Yeah. So one of the things that's a good point. The benefit that it has just to your environment, the farming environment, agricultural environment. One of the things we're working on right now is we're working with some delegations from Ukraine on the topic of hemp and medical cannabis.
Yeah.
This is a very long discussion and conversations that will probably take over the next 5 to 10 years.
Wow.
So Ukraine wants to legalize medical cannabis.
Okay.
More importantly, I think it was President Zelensky said that he wanted to legalize cannabis. One of our guys used to be the liaison when he was in the military to Slavic areas. And so he knows a lot of those people over there. And we realized, because of the massive amounts of people that were fleeing Ukraine, that it's going to be veterans are going to have to rebuild it. And I'm going to put it this way. As far as the politics, I don't give a shit. Okay? It's the Ukrainian kids that can't go to the playground.
Yeah.
All right? If this was happening in Russia, we would talk about Russia. It'd be Russian kids not going to the playground.
Yeah.
Okay? So politics aside, I don't give a shit.
Right.
Right? I'm a veteran. I'd like to see it all just end.
I'm with you on that one.
So we're talking about because they have to rebuild the economies and everything else. So we felt hemp was a very good idea. Industrial hemp on that aspect for Ukraine could build multiple different decortication facilities. And these decortication facilities would make at the end of the product line a raw product that would go into multiple different industries, right? It could be oil and gas industry, it could be soil erosion, it could be many different things, and ship everything up to the EU as a new export. While that's going on, it's helping clean fields and things of that nature. Well, sunflowers also help clean fields, but not on the scope that hemp does. But hemp can be put into many different industries more so than others. So we feel like it would be a great addition to it, and it's something that we would feel would be very beneficial, not only to the agricultural community in Ukraine, especially because of how rich the soil is, but also to veterans when we start talking about the medical aspect of it. Mm-hmm. And what they want to do is they want to discuss how a lot of our states work in medical, some of the things that are working here,
right,
and then find out if it works over there. And so when we have these discussions, we have to remember that this isn't going to be based off of U.S. business style, U.S. morality or ethics. This is based off of Ukrainian morality and ethics, which may or may not be the same thing. They're not wrong, by the way. I'm just saying
it's just their rules of their land. We got to respect that.
Exactly. So when these conversations go back and forth, we have to always kind of remember that. And they're long conversations, but you're seeing cannabis become a topic of conversation in international policy on the positive side versus the negative side. Yeah. So one of the big stoppages for the descheduling that I can think of is going to be the treaties, because according to the last conversation I had with the groups that were in charge of this, the DEA can only go as far as 3. After that, they don't have the authority to go past 3.
Oh.
Now, that I'm going to tell you how complex that this actually is.
Yeah.
And I can't speak on that at a very specific point, but I can give you the person who can.
Yeah, yeah.
Shane Pennington is probably the best person to contact. He's a brilliant person. Been a good friend of mine in the industry for about 3 or 4 years now. He's one of our subject matter experts. So in the future, if you ever want to have a talk with him about how this actually works, how complicated cannabis is, he's going to be your guy.
Yeah.
Him. And there's also another guy here in Fort Worth.
Okay.
His name is Professor Snyder at Texas A&M School of Law.
I have actually met with Professor Snyder before. Yeah.
He's a good guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very smart guy. I like him too.
Yeah, so. no doubt. And we need folks like that are advocating on behalf of cannabis from a scholarly perspective, because that's what it's going to take. You've got, like you said, the screaming kids, and certainly effective, very, very culturally important for sure. But then to affect change, you need folks who know how to work within the law.
Yeah.
That's really what it comes down to. I mean, even here, I didn't realize that the DEA could only go down to 3. My next question becomes, well, okay, who gets to deschedule?
Correct. Right. And so that would be that's a question that I feel Shane has a better
answer for. Okay.
And he's in a more of authoritative position to answer that.
Okay.
That's why I have subject matter experts.
Yeah.
That's why I'm the lowest ranking guy on there. I'm the conductor of this symphony. That's what I do. And I think what's important, and I want to go back to the screaming kids because I love them so much. But they're not really kids. These are,
of course, yeah.
These are adults. These are people like normal, like Texas Cannabis Collective, like so many that we see out there. Weed for Warriors. These organizations are vital to the movement, because without these organizations, there would be nobody paying attention to this movement.
100%.
Right. And so these movements allow us to say, hey, I want you to see what these organizations are doing down here, and I want to explain to you why these are happening through an academic perspective.
Yeah.
So that you have a better understanding of why Weed for Warriors was formed, why the Texas Cannabis Collective was formed. Why do you have all of these organizations, whether they be veteran organizations or just organizations in general for the general public, that are cannabis based?
Yeah.
Right? You don't see heroin based.
Right. There's no cocaine advocacy going on.
There may be a cocaine march in Austin going on, but in Fort Worth they're doing a marijuana march, right?
Right.
And I think that's what's my important point is that I'm telling you there is equally as important as what we do.
Yeah.
To win a war, you have to fight on multiple levels.
Absolutely.
You have to be very strategic with that. There's reasons why that you have different levels of engagement of the enemy, whether it be trench warfare, in the air, covert ops, in diplomacy.
Right.
So they're doing exactly what they should, and I applaud them for it, because like a marijuana moment is a good example. Those guys there work their tails off.
They're on it, man.
And I've been following them for a number of years. If it was for people like that, there's no way we would be able to get into the doors that we can get into.
For sure.
100%. So it's definitely, it's a group effort, and
it is.
Proud of them.
And I think that
I'll be at the marijuana march in Fort Worth.
There we go. What's the date on that? Is that 420?
Yeah, it's on the 14th of October. Okay. And they march at 420.
At 420. I knew 420 was involved.
I think it's the DFW Normals, the last ones that I remember.
Okay.
Texas Cannabis Collective. If you go to them, you find them on Facebook or anything like that, you'll find information on it.
Yeah, check that out. Marijuana March, right? Marijuana March.
Yeah, I think it's the DFW Marijuana March.
There we go.
They hold it every year.
There we go. It's stuff like that, and I think right now we're going through an evolution where, like you're saying, there's the marijuana side of this that I think gets a small part of the population riled up, right? The most passionate advocates for cannabis, but beyond that, there is a tier of folks, and I think CBD has some responsibility in this, that have discovered that cannabis is not just what they used to see it as, as far as a caricature of, right? Like the Bob Marley culture and all that kind of stuff. Again, nothing against that. Love those folks, love the culture, but we have to transcend that. The plant has to transcend that. It has to connect with more folks, and it's starting to, through these different things that we're learning about the plant. Like you're saying, I mean, what's going on in Ukraine, but even here, there's a lot of fields now being replaced with hemp instead of other crops, and so that's affecting farmers and actually bringing life back to some farms here in the United States. But it's connecting with regular people who usually have been dependent on other things like prescriptions and alcohol and other things that are slowly harmful, right? Or maybe in some cases not slowly harmful.
Correct. Well, the project that we're doing in Ukraine is to help them on many different aspects of it, right? That right there, Ukraine's in a position that they could put this as an additional export and create a good economy from it from scratch.
Right.
War also makes investment very cheap in the countries. I'm sad, but that is the truth.
Right.
So I got a feeling that that's what you're going to see. Now, we don't invest. We're not investments. We're not investors. Right. You not want to come to us for investment advice. We're not. That's not what we do. What we do is that we help work out the problems that they're going to encounter when it comes to maybe agricultural, the soil samples, and they're going to need help scientifically getting some of that new land, working with other universities, and that's what we're trying to. And whatever it is that we can get the crops to grow is the best we possibly can. Share strains, things of that nature, and whatever will help the people. Right, that's what they're trying to do. So I'm sure it'll probably not come with its problems.
Everything does.
The medical side is a conversation where we approach it in kind of a different way. So when I talked to last week, the American College for Healthcare Executives had me at the Methodist Hospital. We did a online panel there, or not online, in-person panel on cannabis, and they've never talked about cannabis in Dallas Methodist or at all for the American College for Healthcare Executives. It's not something they want to talk about, but they know that it is a topic of conversation that has a lot of interest, and so they're wanting to talk about it. Well, they called upon us to do it. We're the perfect people. So we came in there with Dr. Doche, who's one of our board members, and Richard Cheng, who's he's also a lawyer here. He's one of our subject matter experts too. And myself, and we made this, when I first started, we made this very simple for him. We said, okay, so basically we're going to talk about cannabis. It comes in a couple of forms, right? Industrial hemp, which we can make textiles and things of that nature, clothes. It has its completely different type of agricultural application, and the economy and economics of it are very, very separate from medical, and will have absolutely nothing to do with this conversation.
Yeah, right.
Then there's the medical aspect of cannabis. Okay, that includes both hemp, which they would grow for CBD, and what we call marijuana. Marijuana is labeled that by the government when the THC of hemp goes 3.3% or over. Right? So essentially, it's all hemp from an agricultural from perspective. So what we talk about up here on this panel are the cannabinoids and how they are affecting the body, which can be derived from either marijuana or hemp.
Right.
We are not talking about how the person receives those cannabinoids. We're only talking about once the cannabinoids have been received and the end process from there. So now all they know is that, well, how did you get this? Well, we can tell you how they got to it, but this is a simple way for you to understand the plant.
Yeah.
From that point on, it's all science, or it's all understanding the research, where it came from. It has nothing to do whether you agree with the plant or not. Right. It has nothing to do with your legal perspective on whether this plant will get put into legalized, so it's in every daycare or whatever crazy thing you may have, fear you may have. It only had to do with how it affected the body. Right. Because I'm not talking to the public. I'm talking to the hospitals. And the hospitals are looking at this, how do we address it once it's legalized? And that's the conversation they want. And that's the conversation they're having a hard time getting, because they can't find a group of people who have the subject matter experts that know this to address it with, and because it's so very, very hard to find. Yeah. So that's what we do. And when we find that is going back to what you said, getting that outside of the bubble, right? Julie Johnson, who is a state representative in this area for the state of Texas, I had talked to her and known her for a number of years, and she's a lovely person, right? And she made a great comment. She said, the biggest problem that cannabis activists seem to have is that they preach within their bubble, but they don't seem to get outside of it, and that's where you really struggle. And I said, man, I was like, that's really fucking true. And so when she said it, I was like, man, she's 100% right.
Well, and there's a ton of support out there waiting for us. You know what I mean?
There is, and I think a lot of it comes from the veterans. That's why the veterans group is so huge. Yeah. Right, because they use it more than anybody else, and it affects us more than anybody else. The illegalization, right? Well, I'd say that. Well, look at the jail cells.
Yeah. But it affects you in a large way.
Correct.
For sure.
And so because of that, I think people are starting to really listen. Yeah. There's this war has been raging on for 20 plus years, and when we realize that, hold on, my kid's almost old enough to serve in the same war I am. This is getting crazy. All the veterans that we're having, the influx of medication that these guys are having. But they notice that when they start using cannabis, all of a sudden their prescriptions are cut in half. Yeah. Now, when it cuts in half, that's a lot easier to manage. 6 pills a day is a hell of a lot easier than 12.
Well, and think about the side effects you're reducing.
Yeah. So here's a good here's something you're gonna like to hear.
Yeah. Well, and while you're getting a drink, I'm just again want to emphasize how much I'm glad we're having this conversation, because it's important to connect with veterans on this. I know several friends and family folks that are have been in the military, different branches, and I don't know a single one of them that doesn't embrace cannabis.
Yeah, at some level.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And they're obviously not active duty, but that's where it's like when things happen in society right now. Obviously, it's hard to get information that you trust. There's a lot of stuff that flies around. You're like, wonder what that is, but when you really wonder what's going on, you look around you. And I remember doing this with COVID. Right, you mm-hmm. kind of look around like, do I know anybody that has COVID? I don't think I do. And then all of a sudden you start hearing about people that have COVID. You're like, okay, so it's starting to get real. It's starting to get prevalent in society. With this, I kind of do the same thing. I don't know that there's a lot of reliable data out there, because every data source you have to question how they gather it, what was the motive, what did they ignore, all that kind of stuff. But if you take a pulse and you look around you, and most Americans, it's certainly people who are listening to this probably know multiple veterans or active duty folks, and ask yourself if they embrace cannabis or not.
Mm-hmm.
You know, take a little mini poll in your own network. Not actually, if you want to, but you know, just you can kind of tell. You could probably know who those folks are.
Well, you notice that like social media is not the same thing as reality.
No.
So
no.
just because it's trending on social media does not mean people give a shit about it.
or even know
about it. I find majority of people just say, I think it should be legalized. I don't have a problem with it. I don't do it, but it's not a big deal. And I know it helps vets, and there's a lot of sick kids out there that really could use and help them epilepsy. You know, you hear they rattle off what they hear.
Right.
And they say, I don't see a big problem with it, because what they don't see is like, I don't know. They kept saying it was bad, but I don't think it was. I don't think it's a big deal anymore.
Well, it's out there now. And here's the thing, and you can test this with other things too. It's out there now, and all of these folks who are just indifferent, right? What they can't do is think of how they've been negatively impacted. Right. Or how, you know, someone they know was negatively impacted. There might be a few cases out there. I know there's folks like that have dealt with psychosis and things like that. I'm not saying that the plant is 100% free of harm.
Yeah, neither is water.
Right, exactly. People drown
all the time.
Quite a bit. We also need water quite a bit. But the point being is those folks don't have that, right? And you can think of all sorts of things like, well, do you know somebody who's negatively impacted by cigarettes or alcohol or cocaine or heroin? It's like, yeah, those all seem to be a problem at some level, right?
Yeah, there's a senator in Texas. I don't know if he's still in or not, but he swears, God, he was a vet too. He goes, he swears to God, when he was 16, his friend started smoking weed and his life went downhill since then. I'm like, you're telling me that your friend,
that's it,
at 16, which your viewpoint is at 16,
yeah, right,
smoking weed, and you think that he was squared away, but he was just smoking weed. You don't think there was anything else that was messed up in his whole life. And today, at a 67-year-old man, you're going to sit there and tell me that that's accurate. He has this just like really negative view on it, and he's blocked some stuff going for the state. And I tell you, Texans, if you want to have legalized cannabis like a market that they have in Oklahoma, you take 35 north.
Yeah, right. Just drive up there,
because this is not going to happen here anytime soon. But if you wanted to have it here, I think you just, we're going to have to get rid of the current program. Because the current program is really put together by Senator Click. What's her name? Stephanie Click. And
you're talking about Teacup?
Yeah. It's absolute horrible program.
It's not a good program.
I have no idea. They tried every which way to try to explain to me. Stephanie Click's group said, we did our research and we feel like this is the best way. Slow and steady wins the race. I'm like, we're talking about lives here, and slow and steady wins. Well, you don't have a single proof this has ever hurt anybody, but what it does is it allows them to take control.
Right. And
it's about control. It's not anything more than that. And when it comes to politics, I'm going to tell you guys, it's not going to make sense. There's pettiness that goes on up there in politics. We see it quite often. We saw it with the PACT Act.
Yep.
You remember when that was trying to get passed, and the GOP senators decided they were going to just block it for the time being for some political pull with the Democrats on something. But that was an important bill to veterans, and veterans really felt abandoned by them.
Yeah.
And we're like, we'd never fucking do that to you guys.
Yeah.
You guys told us to go do something, we did it, and now we're asking that from you, and you
got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, you were like,
right.
You decided to just brush us off. And that's kind of, I think in America, veterans do tend to be a bit brash, but
it comes by the nature, right?
It does come by the nature, but at the same point in time, we're just unique because we have a skill set that not a lot of people would want to do.
Yeah. No, right. For sure. You're doing you and that's why people thank you for your service, right? You're doing something that most other people don't want to do. And it is as necessary gets to self-defense of a nation. And there's a lot of examples of it going on. I mean, John Stewart was involved in advocating for, some of the veterans, but also the 9/11 folks. And there's just a lot of these examples of folks who have sacrificed and politicians are turning their backs on them. And, guys, I hate to say it, but, watch the show House of Cards on Netflix and then ask yourself what's going on, But there's plenty of folks who have said that's closer to a documentary than not.
Oh,
right?
I wouldn't disagree. I tell you, I'm glad we're a 501c3 and not a C4.
What's the difference?
C4 has to do legislation and stuff of that nature. We're a C3. We focus on education and the reality of the world that we live in, and I think that's one of the things. It's if we could educate everybody, maybe subtracting politicians are welcome to come in and listen as well. But we don't give them a stage. I do not give a politician a stage because of the reason why we have as many veterans as we have. And we're kind of like, in my mind, I'm kind of cleaning up messes you guys made.
Yeah.
And I don't give them a platform. But I think if, educating people on just the reality of hemp and cannabis and its potential is extremely important, right? We talk about confusion in our own industry. People think that a hemp can replace another industry, and that's not what it's not what it's for. It's never going to replace fully trees.
No, no, we need trees.
or the fact that, like, for making paper, it's just the science behind hemp hasn't reached the point where it can compete and just toss trees out the window for making paper. Like that idea is not going to happen.
Right.
And the reason is because they don't know the reality. The reality is that you get 6 tons per acre for trees, and you're only going to get 3.5, maybe 4 on the best fucking day with hemp.
Yeah,
it doesn't make enough. But that's not what the point is. The point of hemp is to be a good substitute or something that can mix with it. Right? You mix it with cotton. You mix it with trees. You mix it with that. So that's the initial aspect of it. And there's a lot of things that we're finding, like you can use it for fuels, you can use it for circuit boards, and there's things of that nature that are coming around that we're realizing that the potential of the plant has.
Yeah.
Right? It takes 120 days to fully grow and harvest. And people like A&M are growing and trying to develop strains for hemp that are pure lines that will grow all the way through this region 7 of the United States.
Yeah. So
that we get nice tall plants that can be used for these industries. Now, along with that, I mean, they're doing amazing things down there. They're taking the whole cannabinoid out of the plant and just leaving terpenes. They're increasing the size of seeds. They're doing things to help out with agriculture and stuff like that may or may not benefit the world in the future. They don't know.
Well, but the point is they can find out.
They can find out.
And
they do trial runs and things of that nature. So there's a lot of really great opportunity that's being done with hemp. And I think people have to realize is that cannabis, the plant in general, has been illegal for 80 years, right?
Right.
But other industries have not. They've been prospering during this technical and robust age.
A lot of R&D.
A lot of R&D.
Yeah.
that cannabis has not had. It's got to catch up. So it's going to have. That's why we see problems in labor force. That's why we see problems in standards and operating procedures all across the line.
Yeah.
Is because it just hasn't been around long enough for it to get there. But it'll get there. It's going in that direction. I think
it's on its way.
Yeah.
Well, and you said something earlier, folks, if you want it to be like it is in Oklahoma or wherever it is in Texas, drive north.
Drive north.
But the other answer to that is support these organizations that are starting to stand up, right? And you named a bunch of them, and we'll put links to all of them in this episode down in the description so y'all can check them out. But the point is to support those organizations because those are the ones who are starting to go to the front line and actually fight the war that you're talking about. And they're not doing it from only a marching perspective. Certainly marching, on October 14th, that's fun. It does get good community awareness, but we have the other side where you have the experts who know how to fight in those arenas are going to battle in those arenas, and they're doing that, and they need that support. Awareness is a huge part of that. That's why we're talking about it right now.
Of course, yeah, definitely.
But certainly always vote, folks. You keep voting. That's chipping away. It's a slow burn. But in addition to voting, if you support these organizations, these are the organizations who are going to be the first to affect change, I guess is a good way to put it, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of organizations. We're seeing a large movement of decriminalization within the cities.
Yeah.
So like you said, Dallas, Austin, Houston, San Antonio might be on that list or getting close to it.
Well, it's Dallas as a county, so that includes several cities.
Yeah. And that was a big thing. I think it was in the city of Dallas they decriminalized it. In the county, I don't know if they decriminalized it at the county level, but I know they did it at the city level.
Okay, so I think at the county level, I think it was like anything under 4 ounces.
Yeah.
Basically, you're carrying around more than 4 ounces.
You're I don't have 4 ounces at the house. Jesus Christ.
You're probably up to something.
Yeah. And I tell you what, I talked to a lot of the cops, and they would much rather prefer this whole thing be legal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Most of them do. The unionized cops do not want it to be legalized. And the sole biggest reason they have is because the smell gives them authority to search a vehicle. And while I understand they feel like it's a safety issue, you might just have to find a different way, because you don't have the right to impede upon somebody's right. I mean, you just don't have that kind of right to say, hey, I smell it, I'm going to start searching your car. This is America. In America, we are individual liberty first, community second, right? Now, if you go to China and a lot of these other places over in the East, it's a kind of a switch. And it's not bad. It's just how they work. Yeah. It's how they work, and they seem to be doing pretty well over there.
Yeah.
But it's community first, right? Like in Japan, they're very much not more about the individual much as it is about the whole, right?
Right.
The whole, was it the sum is greater than the whole, something like that? Mm-hmm. And it's beautiful that in the Japanese culture makes it look beautiful. Like
they do.
I started to think to myself, you know what? Maybe I'll change my mind.
Now it's not the freest culture, right? Like there's definitely some rules there.
There's some rules there.
You don't step out of line either,
But if you want if you want individual liberty, then you're going to have to get tough.
Yeah. No, freedom's not easy. I think that's what people mistake, and a lot of folks, it's romantic, right? Freedom's romantic, but it is not easy, and I think we're going through a little bit of that right now. Like if you. And we're not going to get political. I don't like being political any more than you do, right? I'm not here to advocate for either side. I think they're both bad wings of the same bad bird. But the point being is, in society right now, if you want more individual freedoms, you have to go out to more rural areas. You have to get away from density, right? You want to fire a gun, go where people aren't going to complain about it, right? You want to fire a gun in the city, somebody's going to complain about it.
Yeah. When you take that population gets denser and denser, you need to have some kind of structure and order that might impede upon your personal liberties in order for everybody to get along.
Yeah.
And that's understandable. So I think, we're just kind of
pick your poison there. Or, I shouldn't say pick your poison. I just pick your preference, and it's interesting because we should be appreciative a little bit as a society that we've had the opportunity to get to this point. We've got decades of building out these cities, becoming more dense populations, but also sprawling out, building out suburbs, things like that. And you have the ability now to decide: are you a downtown, Manhattan type person, or are you, Farmer John out in wherever, West Texas, and you can do that. There's nobody stopping you from going from one to the other. And I think that's sort of, we can't continue to think that one way is right over the other. Even we've talked about a couple of times now in different countries. It's like, it's not that they're right or wrong, but those are their rules. That's their land. They get to make their rules of their land, and that we have to respect that. But
Europe's been around for 2,000 years. For 2,000 plus years, Europe, most of Eastern Europe, Turkey and other area for probably like 5,000-6,000 years.
Yeah,
they've been living in cities.
Long time,
right?
Long time,
right? America's only been living in cities for about 250 years.
We're still
So-
kids.
So they've been living together in a culture for thousands of years, and they've been densely, in Rome and in Prague and in Istanbul and in London. They've lived together for generations and generations, far longer than we have over here. And they've understood that there's this, part of being in a community which your individual right may not be as important.
Yeah.
And I don't think people in America were like, we've not been around that long. It feels like it doesn't matter.
Well,
it feels like what I'm saying is stupid. But
but you know what? And I think you have some ground to stand on. You're a veteran, right? You've stood up for those freedoms that we're talking about. And for me, what it comes down to is recognizing where you have the ability to flex those freedoms. Like I said, we're in America. You got the Second Amendment right. Does that mean that you can go to a downtown area and start popping off? No. That's not what that means. That's not what that was ever intended to mean.
No, but does it mean that if someone breaks into your house and you shoot them, you have that right? That's exactly
right.
That's
Protect
exactly
yourself, and does that mean that you can, go hunting
on somebody's property and ask them and you can use it? Yeah.
Right. Under the right guys. But that's the thing is, we have to be respectful of these things. And I think bringing up Europe is a great example. You don't see folks in France trying to enforce their culture on folks in Spain. You know what I mean? Or Italy. They all have their own little pockets of culture, and they respect the differences.
They do. What we are seeing over there is a massive migration from one culture that is extremely different into a culture that is not. Now, and it goes way back, and I've heard the argument, and I'm not about to get into this one. But
we can't solve all the problems.
I can't solve all the problems. But that's a different story. And what you're seeing with that is a conflict of cultures.
Yeah.
And trying to take up the same space. And in America, we've been doing this for 100 plus years.
Right.
So we've kind of gotten the hang of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of cultures bouncing around here.
Right. And so I think in Europe, they too have been that way. But they've also had their culture for a lot longer than we have.
Oh, sure.
So I think all over the world, because travel is so much easier now, even for massive amounts of people, that it's going to go through a little bit of growing pains of trying to learn how to, and that means people come. That's not saying that you act, just lay out the red carpet for everybody who wants to come over. Both sides have to learn to give and take, right? Like, if you're leaving your community because you were a shitbag at your place, that means you're coming over here to another place. You're probably going to be a shitbag here.
Yeah.
But if you're leaving that area because you had no job and you needed to get your family to a better place, and you're a hardworking guy, and you're like, hey, I'll learn whatever trade you tell me to.
Yeah.
America's a great place for you to come.
This is the place to be.
Because hell, they'll put you to work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so in that regard, so who is it? You just don't know.
Yeah.
But this is a problem I could never solve. I have no idea what the right answer is. I don't even know what if I'm saying is correct.
We started talking about cannabis, man.
I know we started talking about cannabis.
But honestly, this is sort of, I guess, maybe a fun segue off of it. But I truly believe, I bet you do too, and I think a lot of people do, that cannabis is a uniter. It is something that, and shout out to our industry on that topic, because there are a lot of folks with different political views within the cannabis space that do a good job of coexisting. Mm-hmm. We all appreciate each other for being in the industry that we're in.
Oh, yeah.
And definitely there's a lot of different conflicting views. No doubt about it. You can see them represented. And the great thing is this plant allows us to set those things aside and figure out, how do we get this thing that we know is good for us and we know it's good for other people to other people? How do we do that? At the end of the day, that's what we're all trying to do, right?
Right. When you go to cannabis festivals all over the world, I mean, you talking about, there's everybody there.
Yeah.
Everybody's there.
Yeah.
From the hippie with all the tie-dye and dreadlocks that's rocking it.
Yeah.
To the Chad that's over there with shorts and a polo.
Yeah.
Everybody's there because everybody likes to feel good.
Yeah.
Everybody likes to be at peace. And that's something that I think brings a lot of people together. Now, it's not for everybody.
It's not. Unfortunately, it's not.
Unfortunately, it is not. But I will tell you, it is for quite a few people.
Yeah.
That use it in the medicine world, and may use it for recreational, or just because they had a long day, or just like they would have a beer or something of that nature.
Right.
And that's okay too.
Yeah.
It's something I think culture has to get used to. And I think when we get to the level of these decision makers,
Yeah.
and we start talking to them,
Yeah.
and tell them what's going on in the cannabis industry and how is it affecting the veteran population, and we start getting down in the details that they really want to know and identifying what the actual problems are. Most of the time what we find out is that they never were against it, but they had to figure out a few more problems first prior to being supportive of it.
Yeah.
And a good example of that is when I was talking to someone with the hospital council, and I realized they weren't against cannabis. Not at all.
Yeah.
They weren't wanting it to be illegal. They just had to figure out what it was and how, if it's medicine, how do we put it into the system? And that means, like, do we have to have gloves on and we handle it and put it into a tube and send it? Can it be done that way? Or does it have to be in a certain bag? And these sound like silly questions, and activists sometimes can get really upset, but they're not, because they have the questions. If someone doesn't take the patience to say, well, yeah, we'll help you out with all this. Yeah, that's what they're asking for, and we find that was a really big deal when I was talking to hospital council, a specific hospital council, and I don't want to mention their name because I don't want to put them in a bad.
No, that's fair. That's
position. Fair. But when they told me that it's not really a question of what we agree with being legal or not. Personally, the guy told me, I think in the long run it'll save people a ton of money.
Well, that might be the full circle of the argument, though.
Right. That's a very good point. I love that point. That is outstanding. That is outstanding. And I think you're right too. I think you're very, very right. But from that person's perspective, saying something like that was huge, because it told me that they realize that there's a benefit to the people. Yeah. And they're having to work within a broken system and try to figure it out. Yeah. And they want help. Yeah. And so let's do that. Let's be a community and let's help them out.
Well, and I would say that can translate to the average person too. The average person who's not familiar with or comfortable with cannabis, that you grew up, it was the devil's lettuce. Mom and dad told me to stay away from it, so I did. Yep. I'm not messing with it. It stinks. It's yucky, right? Right. I think they've heard enough over the last few years, certainly since CBD started emerging, and becoming this sort of okay thing to be curious about. But people want that kind of guiding hand of, can I ask some stupid questions, right? And until they can do that, I know this sounds silly, but I know people who are still afraid to Google marijuana because they feel like somebody's going to come after them. You know what I mean?
I know, right?
And that's where we need to be able to give people this path to just have those questions. I mean, that's part of what this podcast is intended for, is to share different stories and conversations, not only about cannabis, but just natural remedies in general, natural different solutions to life where, in general, if you have a headache, here's some Tylenol. Right. Or if you have a cold, here's some cold medicine, or, those types of things. And, there's a lot of folks who are, one, they want to be proactive. I don't want to get a cold. How do I prevent getting a cold? But two, I don't want Tylenol anymore. Or I've heard how bad ibuprofen is for me. Right. I know what it can do to my gut. What is the alternative that I can not feel bad about or not worry down the road it's going to destroy my gut or whatever else? And now people are getting closer to that. But also, isn't that where we have kind of almost a gap, because we have to stop short of saying certain things? Yep. Right? We have to stop short of saying this can do this, or this will help you do this, right? But in a face-to-face conversation that doesn't necessarily hit a published place, there's a lot we can talk about. There's a lot you can explain to someone to get them comfortable with what the plant is, what it's doing when they consume it, and how that's going to ultimately benefit them. Money's a big one. And you talk about access to the plant, that's a big one, right? If you can grow this thing. So let's take the kind of extreme scenario, right, of saving someone money, but also just helping them in general. ADHD is something that I've been able to manage in different ways with cannabis. So take that. Say somebody's got ADHD, they're able to manage, stress and pain with cannabis. And now instead of taking a prescription for each of those things that they're paying, not all these medicines are expensive, but some of them really are. You're paying whatever you would for your prescription, and then you're able to grow the plant, which growing the plant is cheap, right?
Yeah. If you have, once you have everything set up, the initial setup, growing the plants just, other than taking your time to do it.
Yeah.
It's not it's not nearly as expensive as having to buy it.
Right.
So, and I would tell you that on average, I would say an indoor grow is probably going to cost you about anywhere from $200 to $250 a pound. $200 to $250 a pound once you have your initial
That's
setup,
fair,
right?
yeah.
So you do a 5x5 tent, and you put about 3 or 4, maybe 6 plants in there, and you could probably grow a couple pounds out of that. You got your nutrients and things of that nature. But it becomes, you realize that the money you're spending on your pills and everything else, when you're smoking weed, all of a sudden all that free capital comes back to you, and you start putting into it. And it's also therapy.
Right.
So there's a thing called horticulture therapy. You've heard of it, right?
Oh, yeah. No. My wife and I garden.
Yeah, it's extremely important for everybody to get out in the garden. Put your hands in the soil. It's good for you. It came around in World War I. It's been around for a long, long time. But in World War I, they put it in the VA. And they had gardens and things of that nature that the soldiers would tend to. So we see a lot of therapy in it. Now, if you could imagine not only just growing that, but growing your own medicine,
right,
is even far more therapeutic.
Right.
And I think people will start to see this in light as they get educated about what it actually is. So the other thing I wanted to bring up is cannabis, for people who are staunchly against it, see it as something that is a detriment to society, because all they see are people on the side of the street just smoking weed, not doing anything, bums, laziness, high times, Cheech and Chong, and what was the other, the one with Dave Chappelle in it?
Oh,
what was that?
The Chappelle Show?
No. What was the one with Dave Chappelle and it was about being stoners and Half-Baked?
Oh, Half-Baked. Gosh, I forgot.
Love that one. Right.
It's been a long time.
And the problem is that they view that as a negative light. We view it as a slapstick comedy of what people perceive the cannabis industry as.
Right.
He views it as what the cannabis industry is, right? So basically what we're saying is that we're looking at the same thing from across the street.
Right.
So let's say that we live across the street, you and I, right? We're sitting across from each other. And we see this car. It's parked in the road. I see it out my window. You see it out your window. Same car, different views.
Yeah.
That's what we're dealing with.
Right.
We have to remember that. And so our objective is then to what? To get them to see our view. I see what you're saying, but this is what I'm seeing from my side.
Yeah.
And this, I actually have the better, because that's my car. So I know more about that car.
I've driven that
car. And I know on your side, the way the light shining, it looks like they're a piece of shit, but I haven't gotten to that side yet. I'm still working on this. You know what I'm saying? So it's a perception of the problem. They're not bad people who disagree with cannabis. Well, not all of them.
Some of them.
Pete Sessions, he's a dick.
Yeah, there you go.
But most of them really, they just don't know. Yeah. And when they don't know, then we will like to educate. We talk to them. It's like that gentleman who was a state representative. He was getting kind of chastised years ago. When we first started talking, I realized that his problem wasn't that he didn't know anything about cannabis. How would you expect him to know anything about it? That's not his forte. He may never have anything to do with cannabis. Right. Some people never will. Don't expect to know. I don't know. I'm not a master plumber.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't get mad at. I've things I just don't know.
Right.
Right. But I know cannabis, and then that's when I realized, we just need to lay out the education for them in a professional manner that invites them in.
Exactly.
And I think that's what we try to do. There's coursework and everything else that people try to develop for introduction to cannabis. Things like there's several organizations out there that work on that. We're working on trying to get into the workshops for the VA regional hospitals, and we'll do 2 different workshops. One will be on PTSD, and the other one will be on opioids. and we will talk about how cannabis is an effective use and a tool for both PTSD and opioid reduction.
Right on.
To do that is extremely difficult because you have to get into the VA.
Yeah.
So it's about meeting with the right people, unfortunately, and it's going to take some time. But we are working on that. And I think it's going to be good because I think by doing this, we can also offer it as a as continuing education credit hours. So it'd make it worth them coming to. And then maybe the next thing we can try to think about too is that we put the endocannabinoid system into the medical textbooks, so that future doctors and nurses are being educated.
Yeah.
And I tell people like we've been doing a good job of getting everybody's attention, saying that we need to educate, and now we need to start putting that education and implementing it into the systems that we are so used to using already for all other industries.
Yes. Well, and the endocannabinoid system is one that I think is huge because when you tell people about that, all of a sudden it's easier for them to accept that, oh, well, hang on a second. That sounds like, the plant then is something that's good for us. It's we're actually designed to absorb cannabinoids. Mm-hmm. We make our own endogenous cannabinoids in some amount. And when people hear that, if they can go back to a textbook and see that, Now there's that level of credibility. Now I think today you do have Google. A lot of people can go see Google. You can find health journals that will talk about the endocannabinoid system. So there is a level of credibility there already, but that I think completes it, right?
Yeah, I think when the AMA comes out, and I'm not saying they're going to, but if that ever does happen, the AMA comes out and says that cannabis is a therapeutic plant and comes out in supportive of it, I think you'll see a pretty big change start happening afterwards.
Yeah.
The AMA is probably, it's not against, but they're going to be probably one of the harder ones to convince.
Oh, for sure.
And it takes just time.
Yeah.
And we're happy to talk with them on it. But I think when that happens, man, when the American Medical Association comes out in supportive of it, you'll start seeing more cannabis coursework and research being taught at some of these other schools.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
probably put into a lot more publishing.
It does seem like an inevitability, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's going to happen.
It could be far out.
It definitely could be. Now, there's a difference in knowing that it's going to happen and when it's going to happen.
Yeah, right.
I don't know when, right? It's like, going to be a tornado at some point in time.
Well, I know we're kind of deep into the podcast here. We've talked a lot about a lot of different topics that are important, but I want to wrap back around to you for a minute and ask you where did your journey with cannabis get started? How did you begin to embrace cannabis?
I got out of the Army in 2007, and for like 7 years after that, I was working in the aviation industry, buying and selling aviation parts, and I was drinking a lot too. But things would just kind of slowly get worse. My feet would hurt more, and my knees would hurt more. I would have problems. I'd lose a buddy here and I'd lose a buddy there, and you start drinking a little bit more. And then I just started drinking just as a medication to get me to sleep and everything else. And I didn't really want to start taking Ambien or any of that other stuff because I had friends that overdosed on it.
Right.
I figured, well, less likely for me to overdose on whiskey. So I was drinking a lot, and then I remember one day I snapped at my son because he wanted to sit next to me, and I was like, man, what the fuck's wrong with me?
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not being the father I want to be at all. And I had to really look into who I was.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I could tell that there was this person that I wanted to be, but there was this huge wall in front of me. It was completely invisible, and I could see the person I wanted to be.
Yeah.
I couldn't get to that wall. I couldn't figure it out. So I kind of reached out to some friends, and somebody mentioned cannabis.
Man.
I was like, I don't want to get high. He's like, no, dude, it's going to change your fucking life. So he sent me these cannabis pills from California or some shit.
Was it oil?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought it was fish oil. So I was like,
okay. Yeah.
Man, I got my daughter out of the shower. We were walking out, and I felt this warm feeling come all over my body. I was like, holy shit, I'm high. It's familiar. So this is familiar.
I remember this.
And I felt great. I sat down and had an hour. I slept phenomenal. And so I was using those. And I was like, I finally like got a little bit of weed. And I got a little one hitter, and I would hit it every once in a while. I was like, man, that was great. Then I realized I hadn't had a drink in 6 days.
Wow.
And I was like, holy shit.
Without even thinking about it.
I never thought about having a drink.
Wow.
And like 6 days later, I was like, holy shit, I went whole 6 days and I didn't have a drink. And so it just I became more loving towards my kids and my wife.
Yeah.
Which that was more fun. And
that's real, by the way. That is real.
That's extremely real. I'll tell you what, guys, you don't have a good sex life. I'm sorry.
Just try it out. Give it a shot.
And I felt like I was becoming the person that I wanted to be, right? The problem with that was that I had to break a law to do it. And there's not a lot of money being made for people who tend to do the things they want to do in order to do well, right? You know, and so now, because now I'm going to have to get drug tests when I get a job, and I go back and forth. But I wind up starting a farm up in Maine. That's why I know about Maine's.
Right.
They're what they do up there. And I did caregiver for a farm. We had it for a couple of years, and we shut it down. It was really hard to do.
Yeah.
Learned a lot of good lessons from it. And got into the activist role because I felt like there was a lot of guys out there who felt the same way. They were just kind of trapped with the alcohol and the pills, and that cannabis was a way out of it. And I felt like they would benefit from using it if it could be legal. And so, I became an activist. I started working in the legislative side, talking to legislators, thinking I was going to go change the world. And I realized how it all worked. I was like, okay. So I just started doing my own research, and I started looking at the problem from a macro point of view. I said, if you want to get something off the top shelf and you ain't tall enough to get it, get rid of the supports.
There you go.
I was like, well, that's one you go after.
There you go.
So the politicians aren't my focus anymore. My focus are the people that support the politicians, tell the politicians what needs to get done, and give the pressure from the politicians. Those are my focus.
Yeah.
And that's why we educate leadership. And those people are leaders. Like I told you earlier about Matthew McConaughey.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'll say again, but Matthew McConaughey he didn't want to, but people were asking him to run for governor, and I was so glad he didn't.
Yeah.
Because he's a much better leader not being a governor. His personality is not in politics. His personality and how he can benefit the people of Texas, his community, my community, I'm a 7th generation Texan.
And this is coming from an Aggie, by the way.
I'm an Aggie
complimenting a Longhorn over
That's
here.
right. I'm an Aggie. But I mean, obviously, I love his work. But what I really like, I like his message to people and to Texans out here about being true to yourself, being good, taking responsibility for who you are and your actions. He's a good man, and I don't want to see that tainted by politics.
Absolutely.
And so those are the people we look to educate and talk to, is because we know that they're the ones who are supporting the politicians and everything else. And listen, I'm not saying you're not going to go anywhere in the world and not have the political base that has to govern something, right? It's just part of the world. But I can tell you that it's a need, and in order to really get them to understand who you need and what you need to get their supporters to do the same thing. Yeah. Because this is the way that it works.
Yep.
And so that's kind of that's how our strategy is kind of built, and I feel like it's working.
Well, yeah, I mean, you've done some excellent work already, and I want to lean into that a little bit. And I know we're running a little bit short on time, but I think we got a little bit enough time left for this. So you got into the activism side of things, coming from military. What has the response been to your military peers, or from your military peers, on your work and what you're doing? Have you gotten overwhelmingly good response, any bad response, any pushback?
Oh, no, I've gotten a lot of good response. I think probably my only negative response was, it wasn't a negative response. It was my old first sergeant. He said, I don't do that much, but I know a lot of guys like it and it does their thing, but that shit's everywhere. I hate the smell of it. And he goes, he says, but I know it does help out a lot of guys, so
There we go.
I'll be all right with it.
That's all right.
He's all right. I was like,
That's
don't
all
worry,
right.
Pistol Pete, you'll be fine. But other than that, no, I've had great response from everybody. A lot of people, they reach out or I'll just reach out and talk to them and say how they're doing, do a buddy check, and they're always like, I love what you guys are doing. Keep it up. So
how close do you think we are to the military being able to embrace like CBD? Obviously, THC for very obvious reasons is
right.
You don't need to mess with that. But like THC CBD and other cannabinoids.
Well, the most recent thing that came out was that they're staunchly against it. So nothing derived. So even if you live in a state where it's free and it's right next door to you and it's free and you take it, and you won't get any type of civilian legal course at you at all. They'd still would not let you do it.
There'd be military repercussions,
right? Because you're under two different laws, right? You're under the UCMJ, which is the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and then you're also under the civilian law, whichever state and government that you're there.
Yeah.
And if it's illegal through the federal aspect, even though it's the United States, and even though you're in Colorado, they won't let you do it.
Right.
Now, the DOD is under the executive branch. Right. So technically, you could get an executive order that could be done by the president, and he could say that it doesn't matter. That's also not going to happen.
Right.
Not because of this specific administration. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
Right. It would really take Congress. Congress has to come through and legalize it, because there are treaties all over the world that state that if you have cannabis legalized, that you could risk violating a treaty, an import treaty, whatever kind of treaty.
Really?
Yeah. So I was on a conversation with Jamaica.
Wow.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I was on a conversation with Jamaica. This guy was a parliamentarian, as a doctor, and we were talking about cannabis legalization. And he said, in Jamaica, on the books, it's not legal.
Wow.
But the people who live here, if you're a natural born citizen, because of religious reasons, you can use it.
Wow.
But they can't legalize it like Canada did.
There's not like a real market. It's all black market. Just
right. Okay. No, like you can walk in and there's some medical.
Okay.
But it's not full-fledged legal like it is in Canada.
Wow. You never would imagine that.
Yeah, where Parliament passed it and made a bill.
Wow.
The reason is because you do not tug on Superman's cape. That's what he told me.
Wow.
He says Canada can do it because they got a huge GDP. We're just a little Jamaica, and we need all the assistance, and we can't be put into a negative light.
That's crazy.
You tell me.
So there are economic barriers, threats, right? Not like, well, you have legal cannabis, so I can't even think of like what the logical.
Oh yeah, Mexico now. Because Mexico's about to go legal. They take forever to get anything passed, but they're going to go legal, and Canada already has. Amsterdam's legal. You're going to probably see what New Zealand, I think, probably want to be illegal or something.
I think that this is great stuff for people to hear, and I wish we had a bigger audience. Hopefully we will at some point, but I wish more people could hear this and understand this, that there are countries in this world that will not, or maybe penalize you. Maybe they won't trade with you, but maybe they'll penalize you. I guess that's what kind of some of those threats are.
A lot of the treaties that they're talking about, and a really good person to talk to about this will be Professor Snyder.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because this is what his bread and butter is.
Okay.
So a lot of the treaties that are intertwined with the United States trading, the trade agreements and things of that nature, and through the UN and through like NATO and things of that nature, inside those things talk about Schedule I drugs can't be used as a market to make money because it's considered a black market. And so those kind of, and that's that's a very like vague oversight of it, and because it gets far worse than that. But that's when they're talking about the DEA is like, oh, we can only go so far.
That makes sense now.
Yeah.
Well, and that makes sense, because I think there's a lot of people who are also, and me included, frustrated that it's taken this long.
Now, it also, I'm going to say this, it might make sense to you and I
Yeah.
But when Shane gets on this topic, he's going to tell you why. No, it doesn't, and here's why. And he's going to be 100% accurate. So while I say it makes sense, props up to my boy Shane, because he will tell you the reason why it does.
Well, and I'd love to talk to him so that we can get more into that, because I know that there's a lot of folks that I know, and there are folks that listen to this that are curious, and this is supposed to be a podcast to help folks that are curious, right? We want to introduce information. We also want to, and I've said this before, but we want to tell stories about overcoming adversity with natural remedies. That's not always cannabis. Sometimes that's, working out. Sometimes it's drinking more water, whatever it may be.
Sometimes it's mushrooms, ashwagandha. There's all sorts of
mushrooms.
Crazy methods out there that are natural remedies that if you have somebody who can help you out with it, can get over it. And it's not something you do every day.
No. But it's a lifestyle. Like I think what it is it's like what you said. Like as soon as you started hitting cannabis a little bit, all of a sudden alcohol just took a back seat, and you didn't even think about it.
Yeah, it became something that I enjoyed as a social occasion.
Yeah,
which was this original tool that I should be using it for.
Right. And I think that's the whole point, is to tell these stories so that folks can get comfortable with, how does this fit into my life? And it's easy to see certain cultural examples of where this fits in society. You got Willie Nelson, you got Snoop Dogg, you got Colorado doing what they're doing, you got California doing what they're doing. And I think that most folks still just don't see it fitting in their life. Like, especially like we're sitting here in Texas, like I said, right? So there's a lot of folks in Texas. It's like, well, we just don't touch that. We're Texas, right? We don't mess with that stuff.
So from a human perspective, when people say we've been using it for thousands of years, they're right.
It's true.
True, we have been, and we still use it for thousands of years. That doesn't mean that every single person in humanity were using it. But another thing to realize that the medical side of cannabis that came down through Asia, and why we know that Jesus used it in ceremonies and the apostles, everything else, they find it. Yeah, well, that's where it came from. Yeah, that was the migration of medical cannabis, was up through that area and over on to Africa and through the slave trade, and that's how we get it up. It came up through Mexico, and then we kind of met it there, and we're like, hey, this isn't the same hemp we were using before. And no, this is the fun hemp, man. You got the hemp that makes sales. We got the hemp that lets things go, and that's where there was a big problem. Then all of a sudden, you had Europeans seeing people that looked very, very different using this stuff that made them, act in a weird way. And then all of a sudden, this Orientalism mentality created. And I got another guy too.
Hey, here we go.
I got another guy.
His name is chapter of podcasts coming.
His name is Dr. Bradley Bourjardi. I probably fucked his last name up. Sorry, buddy. He's a great guy. He's brilliant, and he's a history of commodities, and he knows all about like how marijuana got to us and everything that went through it. But saying all that, about 7% of human history or less than that, 0.7% of human history has had cannabis illegal. Yeah. Right?
Well, and even at one point at the beginning of this country, if you owned a certain amount of land, you had to grow cannabis, or you had to grow hemp.
You had to grow it.
It was required.
Yeah, it was required, and you cut it and you gave it into the community, and they would all work on it, create sails and ropes and everything else that they could then, it was what you had to have if you wanted to survive. Then you had to do those kind of things, and that's perfectly fine, right? Hey, that's not individual freedom, right?
Right.
Like, I don't want to fight
that's some socialist, I guess, kind of policy.
Yeah, right.
But, point is that there's no denying, and it's not always been the same, right? We're using it for rope, we're using it for sales, we're using it for paper, we're using it for smoke, we're using it for food, we're using it for livestock food too.
Mm-hmm. Once it becomes a part of life, like everyday life, and not a fad, then that's what it is. Right now, it's going through this huge fad thing. Yeah, when you make things illegal, they become fads. When you say something looks stupid, kids tend to do it more. Yep. Right. So humans aren't. We're the same. We do the same thing through all of our age, and I think it'll die out. And one of the reasons why I think that is that I was talking to a lady who was from Amsterdam. Now, Amsterdam's had it legal forever. Yeah. It's just part of.
They just never let it go.
No, yeah, it's just medicine. They don't understand it. Like, people use it for medicine all the time. Why would you guys make that illegal? Yeah. It's the safest medicine out there. Why would you do that? It makes no sense.
Well, I have to believe that part of the world had that reaction when we did that back in the 30s. Like, wait, what?
I thought this was cool, and now we're just doing a U-turn on that.
Most of the world didn't realize it.
And probably communication didn't happen as quick back then.
They didn't realize it until all of a sudden they were doing trade agreements with the United States, and they were like, all right, but if you want to do it, you're going to stop growing that stuff. Find something else. Like, really?
We can't grow that?
You should see the when they the first guy they arrested in Texas for growing hemp.
Yeah.
You should see the look of confusion on this guy's face.
Oh, no.
He's like, why the fuck am I here? I grew this last year. We've been growing. He was a hemp farmer that had been growing hemp for generations on that land. They didn't. Gosh. He said, he's like, I didn't hear it. They didn't know.
Well, and of course, we don't get that story throughout history, right? No, you got to go dig for that.
You got to dig for that.
Now, if something like that happened today, if you had like a criminalization of something like a commodity, and just like that, like corn or whatever, Christmas trees, maybe something like that, farming it for generations, and you will get that story. It'll show up on social media. Look at this guy. He's been done wrong. He's been doing this for generations. Why are we doing it to him? Mm-hmm. You would get that outrage. I don't know how long it would hang around. We have a very short attention span as a society right now. But you would have that bubble up, whereas now, and especially back then, you had so few channels of communication that story probably that didn't make the paper.
Didn't make the paper, and the guy probably got out like the next week, and they were like, "Yeah, man, you can't do it. You have to find some other crop to grow." And that's probably what really happened. I mean, I don't know what the details are where this guy actually left, but I do know that when it became illegal, and everybody knows it became illegal through racial means.
For non-racial means.
Well, right.
So somebody's paper business didn't like what was going on.
They didn't like that. There was a lot of problems with the FBI and everything else, saying that this was a drug that was only blacks and Mexicans use, and it's not good for the people. Right. And so you had a lot of that as well, right?
Well, that was the story, right? There was a guy that went crazy.
Oh yeah, he went crazy and did everything right. They didn't mention, they mentioned marijuana. They didn't probably mention whatever problem that actually guy had. That he was what was they said? He was schizophrenic.
Yeah.
They didn't mention that part. That's the part you should probably mention.
Right. Nope, it's the devil's lettuce. Now it's gone.
Definitely the joint. I'm pretty sure it wasn't the joint, man, because I smoked the exact same joint, and I'm over here looking at you guys like y'all are crazy. Right? I mean, I just stay in school, kids.
It used to be called the peace pipe, man, not the murder pipe.
Yeah, so that does never happen. They make these accusations, and when you come out, and the only press that's out there is New York Times, whatever papers that are out there,
of course.
And the FBI guy comes out and says, "This is dangerous. It's going to kill our kids." And, oh man, you started everybody was like, "Well, fuck that. We don't want that grown." So they just made it all illegal.
Yeah.
They didn't know they couldn't decipher between the hemp and the other. It was all the same to them. And so they just made the whole thing illegal by making a Marijuana Tax Act, made it impossible to be able to grow it. And the industry died out in the 50s. And the biggest reason why they tried to come back, because they had Hemp for Victory, which was something that during World War II, they tried to revitalize the hemp market because they needed to make sales and everything else, right? So they had this thing called Hemp for Victory, and you've seen that's what we're named after, because we believe that we need to re-legalize cannabis because of our problems that we're having with our veteran population. It's the health and welfare of veterans are just being decimated by pills and everything else. And we're talking about American veterans. Veterans all across the world could use this, right? There's veterans in Congo. Yeah. There's veterans in Russia. There's veterans in Ukraine. There's veterans in all places all across the world that have been active, if your government's been active in war, which if you're United States, we're inactive in all of them.
Yeah. We just won't stop. It's a drug we can't quit.
It's good. It's good business.
It's good business.
Good business. The more people we have, the more bombs we can drop. It's good business. And it's a shame too, because I tell you, as a vet, I would love there to be no war.
Yeah.
I think
it's amazing the people who experience war are the ones who are vehemently against it, and the people who don't are the ones who are ready to ride it on in.
Yeah, I mean, I got a big problem with kicking people out of their house at 2:00 in the morning because an old company wants to make more money.
Yeah,
or not because there was actually a legitimate threat to my family or my nation or anything of that nature. There was no fucking threat there. These guys were mad at us because of something we did a long time ago before and we're over here trouncing around. And so, I got some obviously a little bit of regret.
Well,
I don't have any regrets for serving.
But it's real though, and I think
it is.
What you can wrap that back up to is cannabis is able to help with that. And I haven't served, but like I said, I know several people close to me that have. And I know, and again, this is not a political podcast, so we won't get into a lot of the things that we probably could, but things happen, and whether you agree with it or not, person who hasn't been to war, it makes people who have been to war feel a certain way, right? When you spend a lot of time in a place and it seems like it was for nothing, you lost people. You lost part of your life in that place. So, yeah, you're going to feel a certain way about it. And ultimately, what we're trying to get to is cannabis can help with that. We can't undo what's been done.
Correct.
Right?
So when veterans get out, a lot of times they come out in mid-20s or upper, 28, 20, 29.
Right.
And they automatically have 2 or 3 more issues than the normal 28-year-old has.
Sure.
Right. So usually the first 5-6 years, they're doing pretty good. And then all of a sudden, one issue becomes another issue because you start taking a pill for this, it has a side effect. Take another pill for this, has a side effect, and you're dealing with that right off the bat. Instead of saying, okay, we should go to the dispensary, see if we'll kind of if you don't like to smoke, and take tinctures, whatever. Let's find a good solution for you. I want you to try a regimen for a month of cannabis and talk to this dispensary, talk to these bud tenders, and they'll let you know, what do you like? If you don't like to smoke, you don't like to inhale anything, they had tinctures and all sorts of stuff to help
edibles,
you out.
yeah.
Right. Let's try that. I want you to try with this level of THC and CBD in that area.
Yeah.
And let's see where you're at. Okay, come back a month later, and then you adjust it from there. Taking a holistic approach to their health. I think that's what Hemp for Victory really wants to see. At the end of the day, we want to see veterans take a holistic approach to their health. And by doing that, we have to have the health care environment in which they're going into, whether it be private or public, understand how cannabis helps with the body and why are veterans so are going to go towards cannabis no matter what the legality is, right? Yeah. And I think people start to understand that. Another thing, too, is veterans who have families, they're not going to jeopardize family and their welfare for cannabis if it's illegal. And so now we're forcing them down a bad path.
Yeah.
And when people understand that, they hear it. But to understand it is you have to lay it out in a different manner.
Well, and I think it comes down to, humans have trade-offs, right? And so what you're talking about is you're automatically coming out of service and you probably have some injuries. You might have some psychological stuff you're trying to deal with, but you're immediately, behind and not feeling good. I guess just sum it up like that. But then, like you're saying, the option you're being given kind of by default is prescriptions. And then we have enough information now, like we were talking about before, there's so few channels of information. The New York Times posts something, that's truth, we're going with it, everybody believes it, here we go. It's much easier, whereas now someone who's going through that, they get out and they say, well, I see the list of side effects for those prescriptions and that sounds like hell. Is there something else? And they Google something else. And now they are put into a little bit of a tough spot because they know the legality is questionable, if not just illegal outright. But also they know this other path is not good for them either. And one example of this that's non-military related, but it was a bit of a public thing, especially here at DFW. David Irving for the Dallas Cowboys a few years ago.
I know David.
Yeah. Oh, do you?
Yeah.
So a few years ago, I remember they were, they were basically saying you can't use cannabis, and he's like, well, the only other option you're giving me for pain is all of these prescriptions, and I don't want to take those. I think it's totally fair for a human to decide that a list of prescriptions with bad side effects is maybe not for them. And when they see this other thing sitting there, and even take a step further, this person knows it can help. Some people are wondering if it can help. This person knows it can help, and his employer, the person who's responsible for him having to be in this situation to begin with, is saying, no, you can't have that. You have to have this. And so good for him for standing on his principles, and he told the NFL, peace, I'm out.
Yeah.
Right?
And since then, the NFL has made changes.
Yes, exactly.
So
imagine
the MLB and the what's funny is that the National Hockey League has never had a thing about marijuana.
Really?
In the past they have, but
Good for them.
they don't really test. And they're like, we're not idiots, guys.
Well, it's kind of like fights too. It's like, all right.
No. It cools them off. And basketball, NBA, they allow it. MLB allows it. In fact, Charlotte's Web is one of the MLB's sponsors.
Yeah.
So that's really cool.
Yeah.
One of the sponsors, but they have a little thing that they're worked out. And now the NFL. And I talked to David. He's a good guy. I like him. He's has a holistic approach to everything, right?
Yeah.
He really believes in it. And I think seeing professional, I'd like to get a chance to work with the professional athletes on that. I think them and veterans have a lot of similarities.
There's a lot in common there.
Yeah, I think how we came about our ailments are different, but
sure,
our medicine stays the same.
Well, and ailments are there regardless, right? And,
right.
And I think the real commonality is the employer, whether it's the military or the NFL, is ultimately the reason that you have those ailments. Mm-hmm. And both historically have been pretty unwilling to take responsibility where they should.
Yeah, and I think they were smart to make the adjustment.
Yeah.
And the military will have to do the same thing because currently between 18 and 25, the people who are eligible for military service live in an area that have 95% access to legal cannabis that would make them eligible for service. Now, what does that do? Why is this bad?
Yeah.
Well, our recruiting numbers are very low.
Right.
And when you don't have any military people to run the military stuff, you become and you start spouting off to all these other larger organizations that have people that it's not a volunteer force.
Yeah. You
just get in because I told you to. Mm-hmm. You might want to pay attention to that. And so it's a military readiness issue. I kind of sarcastically talk about it, but the command staff understands that as well, right? And so when we bring those statistics to them, they're going to immediately ask, okay, so if we legalize it, how many of those people are actually going to want to serve, right? Well, that's on you. That's your recruitment problem.
Yeah, right.
At the same time, though, at least we eliminate a barrier that can keep them in. And also, there's people who've been in for a number of years that work for the DoD on the civilian side that can't take CBD either.
Man, that's so wild.
Yeah, we know somebody who got retired early.
Really?
Yeah, she's living.
Not just because she worked with the DoD. Not even
she was a DoD.
Like a contractor?
No. She was a DoD employee, but she had served in the military beforehand. And then, like a lot of people in the military, they'll serve for 20 years. You get a paycheck, right? For that point on, right? Pension. And then they take that 20 years and they add it and they roll it over to a civilian job. So they get like automatically 10 or 15 years added that. And they do another 10 years of the civilian job. And then they get 2 retirements. It's awesome. And a lot of guys do it. And you should continue to do it. It's awesome way. It's an awesome thing to the system, right? But if they get caught doing CBD, it'll all be thrown away.
Man, and see that's where I think folks like David Irving, props to him for standing your ground. You're negatively affected for sure, but it affected change. People that are in that position, there's no reason they shouldn't be able to take CBD. That's crazy.
I know. And luckily now the NFL players can kind of do whatever they want to do as long as it's within the rights of the state, right? So if you're in a Dallas Cowboy, they're not going to test you for it anymore, I think, from what I understand the policy is. But if you get busted for it in Texas,
they'll splash on the wrist.
Then you're probably going to get fined like $20,000, which is like my paycheck for a whole year.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
But still, the folks at the DoD, they don't have the ground to stand on. They don't have the ability like a David Irving, who he made some money in the NFL, so he's able to go off and have a life outside the NFL. They don't. Other people don't have that. Like you're saying, you got your pension and everything. Like you've decided a path that really you earned that, but at the same time, you're not entirely free, which is sort of ironic almost.
Right. Yeah. And the older you get, the more cannabis becomes a part of your life. If you look at people who are purchasing from dispensaries, the best customers are 55 and older.
Yeah.
A, because they got the money.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And B, they just come in and they're consistent.
Well, it's helping them with multiple things at that point.
It keeps them more active.
Yeah.
A lot of the elderly starting to do it more often because it's keeping them more active. And remember, we said earlier, movement is life.
Movement is life.
And if you don't move, like get out in the garden, whatever. I got a lady who lives across the street from me. She has an impeccable outside garden. She's great. She mows her lawn. She's like 80-something years old mowing her lawn, and she's out there pulling weeds every day out there.
Yeah, man.
And that's what she does to stay in shape. That's what she does to stay, alive and have a purpose in your life. And weed does that to me. Like, I'll tell you this, cannabis gave me a purpose in life. It wasn't cannabis that was my purpose.
Yeah.
But it gave me the ability to see what was important and make them a priority.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't have the discipline in your life to be a better person, weed is not going to help you.
No,
if
it's
you're a
not
turd,
going to
you're,
add
no,
that.
no, if you're a turd, you're a turd. I can't help you with that. But if you have the want and you really desire to be the better person, cannabis can help you by taking a lot of these ailments that are bothering you.
Yeah.
And help you get out of it, right?
Absolutely.
And mushrooms as well too. Psilocybin is a huge benefit to people who are working through things, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
No, and that's probably a good place to try to wrap this, because I know we've gone deep into this and beyond. I don't know if what the rest of your schedule is like, but we've talked a lot about the importance of cannabis as a natural remedy, and it's important to, I think, acknowledge that it's just one of so many. And look, we've got water here.
Oh yeah.
People don't drink enough water. You're saying movement is life. People don't get out and move, breathe oxygen, get that vitamin D.
Stretch.
I can't tell you how many times people come to me, oh man, this hurts. I'm like, did you stretch? Like, stretch.
Yeah, stretch. I
Stretch a
every
long
single day.
time, man.
I can touch my toes. I'm almost 50 years old.
That's awesome, man. Heck
I
yeah.
love stretching.
That's what
I do it all the time. I'm very flexible. I agree. There's this, and I see it though. But if you look in America, we're more focused on getting out and being active. Now, I know the pandemic set that back a little bit, but it's coming back.
It is.
And I like that. So that also goes hand in hand with eating right, eating healthy.
Right.
And I think over time we'll start to see, as it gets descheduled and more accepted, you're going to see everybody talking about how you should implement cannabis and everything else into your routine. Now, that doesn't mean a lot.
No.
Because, some people may not want to use it very much. I don't use it before I go work out.
Oh, I do.
Yeah,
I do.
That's the thing. Like, there's people that do.
Yeah.
It doesn't do me good. I like it when I come back.
Okay.
But I never do it before I go work out.
Okay.
Right. And everybody's different. I hear people that they love to do that. They'll do it and they'll go do yoga and things of that nature. And it's not my
I'll go run 5 miles.
Yeah. People go run 5 miles and do it, and they love doing it. I'll go on a hike and do it.
There you go.
I love that.
There you go.
But so I use it in a different manner. But that was my point. It's a tool.
It is.
It is a tool, and as a tool, it works on specific items like hammers, right? We know what they use, but you use it for something. Sometimes you have to whack the shit out of something. Sometimes just a little tap will do you.
Yep.
And knowing how to use that tool is vitally important.
Absolutely.
And education is the best way to learn.
Absolutely. And it's stuff like this. Right now we have to have conversations like this because it's going to advance the opportunity for education, not just people hearing this, but like you were talking about, the AMA eventually being able to embrace cannabis and build that into a medical curriculum in this country that includes the endocannabinoid system. So all these things stack onto each other, but these conversations are so important, and it's most important that we stress cannabis is only one part of a natural remedy lifestyle, and it is a lifestyle. It definitely is, and it's something that kind of snowballs on itself. That like you said earlier, when you started smoking cannabis, all of a sudden alcohol just fell out. And you use it after workout. I use it before workout, but ultimately it has a place in people's lives that when they're given the opportunity to try that, it can be very life changing. But because so many folks don't have the opportunity still, right? And it's not that they don't have access, but it's like what you're talking about, where they their job prevents them from being able to use cannabis, even CBD, like police officers. I've talked to several wish they could just use CBD.
Oh yeah.
You know, or wish they didn't have to deal with it. You know, I
They're
mean,
like, when I retire.
Yeah.
I got 3 or 4 buddies of mine right now that are like, when I retire, I'm gonna call you.
and so, you know, we want to keep advancing this lifestyle. We want to keep giving folks more access to it. So, Robert, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you joining me today, and I hope you can come back, man.
Oh yeah,
I'd love to
anytime.
continue
I
the
love doing
conversation.
podcasts. This is one of the things we love to do. Everybody on our board likes to go on podcasts and talk. That's how we work.
Yeah.
I love it. Anytime, buddy.
Yeah, man. So, thank you, sir, and y'all. I thank you for joining us, and I hope you'll join us next time. But we always sign off by just saying, I hope y'all feel better today.
Hope you feel better today.
There we go.